Hey everyone, Sari here. Just gonna go over the defenses in this video. I mostly stuck with the same defenses I left off with last anime season. The Edelgard being a sort of bodyguard for Veronica and Felix. Veronica does a great job of just controlling the area that the enemy team can actually use before the map starts moving around. And Felix really helps shut down any Lynja nonsense or Layla nonsense or well, basically anything ranged. Mirabilis gives him ground orders to help him actually stay mobile. Eliwood is Eliwood. And he's basically always going to get danced, since you can't typically isolate both Mirabilis and Dorothea, and wherever he moves, one or the other of them can dance him. Circe is still a great threat. Her position here is one thing that I'm really thinking about, because it takes her a while to actually make it into the fight, which, means she's a lot less of a threat. So, this is something I'm thinking about. I made some minor updates through the week. This version was mostly an update for Veronica, who I decided to give a push skill to. And some flowers here. And then Felix I gave Def Res Bond to as well. I think it'll help him out a bit more overall than the speed will. So, we'll see. And then the last update was mostly just to shuffle some traps around after one of the matches. And I also ended up getting a merge for Veronica from the legendary banner, so that was a fun thing to find. Overall, the defense did really well. It was almost a wall of successes, outside of one clean loss, but overall I'm really happy with how this is done, and I think I'm going to stick with this defense going forward. I might tweak things here and there, but overall I'm pretty happy with how this is done. So let's get started with this first one. This was a fun way to start the week. They brought a +10 picnic Flora to their party, and she's got a lot of attack, honestly, especially because she's running a fortress skill here, and boots for her seal. She's still got some really impressive stats. They're backing her up with isolation from Fjorn. Leanne for dancing. Tina, Naga, and Reagan. I imagine most of this is to act a bit like a Brynja or Oliver type tank, where you pick off a major threat before it has a chance to do anything, and then just let Flora tank her way through anything in the melee. There's a bit of a problem with that approach here, though. That problem's name is Felix, who actually ends up heavily winning any fight that Flora takes. So I think once they saw the combat forecasts, they just decided it wasn't going to work out. This was a kind of fun way to see the second match, is just someone being like, nope, I want nothing to do with this. That's what ladders are for, though. On to the next actual match. This was a bit of an eye-opener, and honestly this was where I started realizing just how effective Micaiah is against this team. This Micaiah's just, wow. He also brought a +10 Summer Mia. This Disarm, Trap, Pulse, Smoke. It makes her very, very good at just getting in and annihilating something. And a +10 Tethys. Only 4 stars. Which seems a little odd, but especially when you've got these two at 10. And then Naga is a Smite bot, Reagan, and a Duo Seeker. This was where I switched things up a little bit, and I'm really glad I did, because even though this is only a level 1 catapult, this is a great sort of demo of how many people like to stick a catapult in this lane. And it's why I moved the hindrance over to this column. I think it's still about as safe as it is, or it was, over in lane 6, so we'll see. And then here I think they were just scouting to make sure that Micaiah could actually deal with Felix, and she can. Effective damage does a lot of work. And, well, an unsniped bolt tower just makes it that much easier.
I'm right here.
Interestingly, it's actually really close. Without the bolt tower involved, she only overkills him by 6 points of damage. So, that's interesting. I think if we ever get a Fallen Shield seal, it's going straight onto Felix from the defense team. This was also an interesting little move they used, where Reagan is blocking in Dorothy and Saros, and without any way out, that actually locks 2 members of the team from the fight. And Micaiah can just flatten Edelgard. Yeah, again, she's really good against this team. And the problem is that they didn't have enough actions to take out Veronica as well. And that's a problem, because she can take out Reagan, and then Saros with ground orders can just warp in and knock out Mia. And then a dance, because Micaiah's not taking any damage from Dorothea, means that Saros actually flattens Micaiah too, even through the effective damage. Thanks to Dragon Wall.
It is your time. Till death do us part.
And losing all of their front line like that is enough for them to surrender. So, part of the reason I was pointing out that catapult in the 6th lane last match was because this team brought the exact same structure layout, and their catapult's maxed. So if I'd still had this hindrance here, not only would it be gone, which lets them use Micaiah and Altina, but it would also mean that they could potentially just bait Dorothea by breaking this pot, which is something that I also wanted to avoid. So I think this is probably a safer lane for the hindrance overall anyway. Yep, Altina's just herself, as usual. Micaiah. I don't know if I'm hoping for a Fallen Shield Seal, because I imagine there would be some really scary armors wandering around with that. But I wouldn't mind it for this defense, it would be really good for Felix. They take a couple of turns here just to wait for the Bolt Tower, which was interesting because they don't actually end up using its damage. Mostly just because, well, there's only one target Altina can actually attack here.
Oh, what fun!
And she can't quite finish Edelgard off.
I'll cut my own path.
That almost wonder if they thought that Altina would quad Edelgard, because the Twin Blades would have finished her off there. But
I shall bestow a gift.
as it is, Eliwood actually survives those Twin Blades, and without Vantage either, there's just not a lot that she's going to be able to get done. Then he gets to Gale Force through Plumeria. Unfortunately, that means that Veronica doesn't have any good targets to go after next. She can't quite pick up Micaiah up here, especially without solo active. Micaiah's just really bulky, at least against magic. And, well, at this point they keep going. They can pick up a lot of knockouts here since Edelgard and Eliwood are both really low. And of course Micaiah is going to sort of flatten Felix.
Nothing can tear us apart.
I guess in a way I'm kind of glad that Micaiah's not going to be on the banner, just because she's a really good answer to this defense. Oh, I say that, but they didn't end up winning the match, so neither did the last one. So, even though they did pick up a lot, they didn't get rid of Veronica, who's, now that she's in range of something other than Micaiah, has a pretty easy knockout. George gets to bait Dorothea forwards, which is, I'm pretty sure, why they were moving him here.
Thanks. Come again.
But unfortunately, Seros at this point has nothing that threatens her on the field. And, well, she just one-shots Reagan. They might have been able to deal with her by using Micaiah's duo skill, but I'm not sure. They go after Mirabilis here, and Veronica next. Which, I mean, that would give Seros another free knockout next turn, and at that point, they would have lost the match. So, they just surrendered here. They probably didn't want to keep it with that many losses anyway. Speaking of armor effectiveness, this is a water season, and, well, everybody's favorite archer is in season this week. Maxed out Croms with 4 mythics are a little bit horrifying. They've also got a maxed out Azura too, which was fun to see. They brought Fjorm for the isolation, Altina, Reagan. A Swordbreaker Naga is interesting. I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be dealing with. Maybe Eliwood? I don't know. I'm not sure if they quite understood how Veronica's threat range works when she's the bonus unit, because I think they got really caught off guard here when Eliwood just runs up and attacks.
Not good enough.
Sadly, Reagan is just barely not bulky enough for him to get a Gale Force, but we still got a knockout there, and then Veronica gets danced forward and just flattens Naga. I think they probably could have won this from here, but they just decide to surrender. This was another interesting one that I think I'm going to go back and look at some more, because they were pretty close to being successful here. Although, to be fair, this is an incredibly impressive hike. I personally don't really like Repel on him. I think that it steps on his own damage reduction too much and you get a lot less value out of it. but it is really useful in case you run into hardy-bearing stuff that can actually attack him twice. But in that case, it's kind of just better to run no follow-up anyway. And they're backing him up with the plus 10 Lucina, which is fun to see. Reagan's pretty standard. Maria, Altina, and Naga. They've got, I think, a full set of chills, yeah. Which is really nice, honestly, just to help make everything more manageable. So, I'm pretty sure they knew how this threat range worked, and they just wanted to have Ike intercept everything. And he does a really good job of it, to be honest. Felix can't do much here, but... Veronica gets a chunk in. Yeah, I say a chunk, and it gets reduced all the way to 13%. But Felix actually just tanks this, which is a lot of fun to see. And Felix surviving here, even though Edelgard ends up getting herself knocked out.
No mercy.
It's actually pretty important because they don't want him to be alive for the next turn. So overall, it went pretty well for them this turn. They can pick Veronica up here without any problems. Unfortunately, they take a gamble on this trap, and it does not work out for them. And then I'm not entirely sure what they were doing with this positioning. And because Ike isn't running no follow-up, well,
You won't like this.
he can't deal with Eliwood. Even though Eliwood went Gale Force, he still gives Felix a way to jump forward and just snipe the area. And Lucina does bait Dorothea, which is really unfortunate, but it's not like she got knocked out, which means she's still a problem for the next turn.
The
Now,
time has come.
Mirabilis, on the other hand, gets absolutely wrecked. The follow-up, though, with Seros, Ike can't actually deal with her very well, again, since he's not running null follow-up. Which actually means that Seros does a lot of damage thanks to Hardy Bearing. They have Lucina finish Eliwood off here, and I think they went after Felix because they figured,
The time has come.
well, it's the biggest heal Ike can get, and that way, you know, Felix isn't going to threaten Naga or Reagan here. Unfortunately, I think they really, really underestimated Seros.
It is your time.
And she gets him low enough that Dorothea can actually finish him off.
I left an opening.
It's something I want to test, though, with a null follow-up Ike instead, since I have one. Because I think with null follow-up, they might have actually been able to win this match. This was the only failure of the week, and while I'd like to fix this, I haven't quite figured out how to do it without drastically changing the defense, which seems to be holding up pretty well overall. And the key to this is their absolutely maxed out plus speed Crom, who is backed up by a Caden, who's giving him an extra 6 to stats, plus the extra drives on top of that. So they also brought a plus 10 Naga and a plus 10 Altina. So while I think I'm going to consider this for a while just to see if I can come up with a good way to deal with it. I'm not too worried about this loss overall, especially because as a legendary, Chrom isn't actually in season every week. And a lot of the reason he does so well here is because he can actually one-shot Eliwood. And Dorothea running forward to get herself knocked out before anything else happens also means that Ceres doesn't get to attack Chrom either. And if Ceres had attacked Chrom, I think this might have gone a bit differently. Yeah. And, well, effective damage is pretty good. The only one who can really attack safely is Veronica, and she can't get much done here against all of that speed. Especially since Dorothea got herself knocked out that early. Yeah. It's a very impressive Chrom here. Part of this, too, was just that they were able to snipe the Panic Manor without any risks attached, which is part of why I switched the traps around after this. I think it's probably the easiest way to try and slow this down or just prevent it from happening without changing too much else on the map. And, well, Edelgard attacking into an Altina is not going to end well for her. And from here it's really easy for them to just deal with it. Especially since all of this happens just in time for their bolt tower to chunk Ceres down. I don't think she would have survived long even without it, but still, it helped out. They did give me a fun rematch to close the week out with, so there's that at least. Yep, and then this seems a little fitting too. Yep. I don't like that it was this easy for them to do, but I'm not too worried about it, partly because it hinges really heavily on a single unit, so once I figure out a good way to deal with Chrom without changing too much else on the team, this strategy stops being very effective. So I think most of that just involves getting Ceres to the fight earlier. But we'll see. Always good to bounce back from a failure with a success. And, you know, it feels even better when it's a rematch. Not for any reasonable reason, but it does. We're seeing a lot of Chroms this week, and duo Micaiahs, and they went even deeper on the water legendaries with a Leaf. This is actually a pretty Gale Force-centric team, thanks to the Gale Force Reagan and the +10 Gale Force Rayson and Leaf. It's a really... I think this is a very strong team in most cases, just because you can use Layla to soften things up and get a Gale Forcer closer into the fight to get started. Unfortunately, there's a couple of problems with that into this layout, mostly involving Felix and, well, Edelgard being a bit of a block for Gale Force attempts. Also, I think they just got caught off guard by Veronica's threat range activating the map, which means Layla gets knocked out immediately. And then Veronica gets danced, and Rayson gets knocked out shortly after that.
Forgive me.
And without those two, they just decide to concede instead of trying to finish the map. me wonders how often this will happen if Saros ends up winning the Hero Rises gauntlet and we get her for free. Because at that point, everyone's going to start using her on their defenses. And well, people will figure out all of the quirks pretty quickly after that. This team brought a +10 Tethys along, which was fun to see. Which is really great for Tamari support. And this hurts to see, it really does, when you're replacing a Mythic's personal weapon with just a basic lightning breath. We got Reagan, Fiorum for the isolation. I haven't seen as many of her as I expected, if I'm honest. I figured just about everyone would have one now after the free Formasoul and Legendary Leaf. And, like the last one, I don't think this team was expecting Veronica to activate the map. Which, well, this time Eliud even gets to Gale Force, and
I can't be your bride.
yeah. He picks up Fiorum Leaf pretty easily.
I must fight.
And Mirabilis was isolated, so we don't get anything else, but losing those two is enough for them to surrender. This one felt a little odd, strategy-wise. I think it's kind of a hit-and-run approach, where they use Edelgard to just intercept everything that comes in after they pick off a unit or two. It's not a bad idea. Legendary Azure is honestly really great with this, especially if you have two dancers. And Smite bot Naga with a Reagan. They don't actually go for that, I think partly just because Felix is not going to care about Lysithea. And they just plonk Edelgard on the defense tile. This does not end well. I do design this map, I do design my defenses with these defense tiles in mind, so it's pretty rare to see someone actually successfully take advantage of them. Edelgard survives the first round, but once her buffs are panicked, well,
I've done all I can.
at that point, Eliud just picks her up pretty easily. You can't get in range for anything else, but honestly at that point they're not in a good spot anymore. This is a neat way to close the week out. We did end up missing their bolt tower here, but I think most of their strategy here is to use a dominance boosted Hector to just basically secure one round knockouts against anything he fights. It's a good idea, but of course if you run into a Duo's Hindrance, you're going to have some problems, especially if you can't snipe it before the fight starts. And they, I think, like a couple of the other ones, they just did not expect Veronica to activate the map like this. So,
You are my one.
Eliud Gale forces through Sigurd, and gets to pick up Micaiah as well.
Till death do us part.
The nice thing about this match was just how perfectly the team managed to line themselves
I
up
don't think so.
in a defense formation, with Edelgard and Felix just blocking everything. They pick off Ellie would and try to have Hector tank his way through this, but unfortunately Cirrus is very hard to handle if she just gets to attack like this.
Your luck's run out.
Especially in her bonus week. It'll be interesting to see how much she can maintain her presence outside of that. Because I think the bonus week stats do a lot for her. I mean, obviously they do, but... And then Felix just gets to warp in and pick Naga up too. And at that point the match is basically over. So they just concede it from there. Especially when Cirrus just picks up the Bolt Tower before it can actually activate. Oof. Well, that's all of the defenses for this week. Hope you've enjoyed the videos. Good luck with your own matches, and I'll see you next time.